So this Shedeur Sanders NFL draft thing is interesting, and I think I have a little bit different opinion than a lot of people probably do on this matter. And honestly, out of all the opinions that I've read, I don't know that I've saw anybody say this exactly, but you know, there's a lot of blame being thrown out. Shedeur, he ends up going in the fifth round to the Cleveland Browns, and I'll start off by saying this. I will not say that Shedeur Sanders is a bad quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback, but this is all to be determined, right? He's going to be in the league. He's going to get a chance to prove us all right or wrong. So, with that being said, I think the fall of Shedeur Sanders and of all this that's happened this past weekend, it's at the fault of ESPN. It's at the fault of the sports media and social media. Also, it had its hand in this as well. And let me explain. So there's a thing that I like to say, kind of a phrase that I've come up with. It's the truth according to ESPN. And honestly, it can stretch further. It can stretch into the truth according to the sports media. A narrative, if you will. And it all started, I want to say, back when Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, took the head coaching job at Colorado. It really started then. And ESPN, I remember they in particular really jumped on the bandwagon. They pushed forward and full steam ahead for Colorado, for Deion, for his sons. It really started then. And look, I understand. Like, Coach Prime is money, baby. Like, he brings eyeballs to the screen, and they cashed in on that. And honestly, I can't blame them. Okay? At least that first year, there were more people watching college football that normally would not. They were tuning in. Big numbers. And honestly, that's great. That is wonderful for the sport of college football. I can respect that. The perception of Deion, the perception of Shedeur Sanders eventually, way up. Okay. A little bit of time goes by. Last season, Colorado's better. Okay. Wow, Shedeur Sanders, this is a Heisman contender here. ESPN continuing to push the narrative a little bit further and a little bit further. Again, Travis Hunter, doesn't hurt to have Travis Hunter on the team. I really think that Travis Hunter is what made Shedeur look as good as he did. Now, there were a lot of other, honestly, great wide receivers at Colorado, and honestly, who threw the ball to him? Okay? I'm trying to prove the point that I'm not dissing Shedeur Sanders. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I really do, honestly. And a little something happened, and to kind of coin a little bit of business here, like a little bit of business finance, let's pick a random company. I'll think of one in my head. You can think of one in yours. You don't have to say it out loud, but remember that company. So that company that you picked, they do something, they come out with some information, or they make some kind of business decision that they do on purpose that artificially inflates the stock of that company. This is a company that has stocks on a stock market. So if the company that you picked is a privately owned company, pick another company real quick. So anyway, they do this. The stock price artificially goes up because of whatever, because of factors. But we'll say for this one company, this company is the Sanders family. ESPN pushes their stock to the moon. To the moon, baby! Everybody goes in, they buy in, and they buy in, and they buy in. Stock price goes up. Then the NFL draft gets here, and it starts crashing. Everybody starts selling, panic selling, and, all the people that, bought in, they're getting screwed. That may or may not have been a bad example of this, but nevertheless, here's what happened on draft night. We finally learned that the perception is not reality. What you and what I were told by the sports media, what you and I were told by ESPN, that Shedeur Sanders was the number one quarterback, or at least the second best quarterback, and them pushing that narrative hard, extremely hard for weeks and for months. And we all found out this weekend that the NFL owners, the GMs, the teams, the organizations, they live in their own bubble. They do not form their opinion based on what ESPN says. They do not form their opinion based on what Fox Sports says. They don't form their opinion based on what us on the internet say. They have their own perceptions. They form their own opinions. That's what they're hired for. That's what they do. They wouldn't have jobs if they had to go on TV, if they had to watch TV, if they had to watch YouTube or whatever in order to like figure out, hey, like which guy should we be picking in the draft? Oh, let's see. ESPN. Mel Kiper said, okay. Oh, well, if he gets off the board, we'll go with this guy. No, they wouldn't have jobs if they did that. And what we learned was that, ESPN can artificially inflate somebody's stock. That doesn't mean it's a great buy. That doesn't mean it's smart buy. And the NFL knew that. And look, I do not believe that there is a social issue, any kind of social issue, anything like that I've seen a lot of speculation online, a lot of people trying to come up with their own narratives of what happened. If that was the case, and I thought that was the case, I would say that. But I do not believe that. In this case, I don't. And I think this is just a case where, unfortunately, Shedeur Sanders was the example of what happens when the media, sports media, ESPN, tries to influence, hype up a player that is not as great as was perceived by them for whatever reason. If there's anybody that was hurt by what ESPN did, it's Shedeur Sanders, and I hate that for him. Now, he'll be okay. Look, there's a lot of problems. There's no way around it with the Sanders family, with Dion. There's problems, and a lot of people perceive that as baggage, future issues that they don't want to have to deal with later on down the road. Some call it arrogance. Some call it just confidence. That's what it is. Some people call it confidence. Could be somewhere in the middle. But overall, I think even for Shedeur, he saw what everybody said about him based on what ESPN and all these people have said. And then people watch ESPN, they read the post, and then oh man, wow, he is something else. He is like a generational talent. And then they talk to somebody at work about him, and then they go talk to their friends about him. And the whole overall perception of somebody, of Shedeur Sanders, is way up here. And Shedeur sees that, and he sees himself being praised. That further, pushes the ego. And look, that's okay to have a little bit of an ego now. But that is what I think happened. And he got shown reality. But I think he's going to be okay. Dion's going to be okay. I know he's still proud of his son. He's proud of Shiloh Sanders. And I think this is going to end up being good for Shedeur. He's going to get a chance to prove the haters wrong. I honestly think it's going to be better for him in the long run than if he would have if the truth, according to ESPN, was the actual gospel truth. He's going to do great. Going to Cleveland, not a great franchise to go to. He's going to figure it out, or he won't. Learn something from this, that Mel Kiper and ESPN are not, no matter what he says, that is not the truth. That is not always the truth. That is his opinion, and his opinion is like this piece of paper right here. It's like this piece of paper right here. It's how you perceive it. And just learn from next time. All of you people watching this, the perception is not always the reality. Is that philosophy? We learned some philosophy lesson today. We learned some business, maybe some conspiracy. I don't like to call it. I don't want to call it a conspiracy because I don't believe that it's a conspiracy. But quite interesting. Thank you for watching. My name is Brandon Taylor. Stay vigilant, my friends.